Hello folks, my name is Greg and it's time to wrap up Advent of Tekla 2025. Until that point of time, I have received 60 answers and quite of those are very good. But, even the average result, 16 points for 24 questions, is a great result. So congratulations for everyone who participated in that contest. Now I would like to show you the results, the correct answers and my short comment about why it was the question like that. So let's start with the first one. The first question was about direct modification, and that was the tricky question, because in the Tekla UI that feature is named direct modification, and it is about quite intuitively trying to align points, faces to adjust those objects. And it comes with the Tekla, but also as a Tekla Open API developer, you have the possibility to add that kind of functionality to your plugins. So there is a specific API for that. And as you can see, here it says direct manipulation. So to use that feature, you have to use the direct manipulation namespace. So the correct answer is the direct manipulation. And I can just guess that at the very beginning of the development, it was direct manipulation also in the UI. But the word manipulation is not the best one. So that was the correct answer. Question number 2 was about custom property. And the custom properties are the way how you can extend the report functionality inside of the Tekla. So if you have quite specific calculation method, the logic behind getting some quantity from Tekla, then you can wrap it with the custom property and then use in the reports, in the templates, or even use it for the filtering purpose, which is quite nice. So the custom properties, it's just the implementation of the specific interface. And the name of the interface is the iCustomProperty plugin, because at the very beginning, almost everything was a plugin, probably in Tekla. So here, that was a tricky question, and iCustomProperty plugin is the correct answer. The next question also belongs to the category of tricky one, because it was about how to properly store your changes on the model objects. And you know that at the end of your application, you have to call the commit changes, but on which type of the object you need to do it. Because for the model objects, there is nothing like commit changes. It's not available there. So if you want to persist, for example, the name, the class, some type of the property of the model object, you first call the modify on the model object, and then you commit changes on the model itself. So at first, just call the modify. Naming is always the hardest part of the software development, but fortunately for the point in Tekla Open API, the definition, the name of that class is just point. So here, nothing strange, just point. I love that question, because, what should be the name for the class representing the column? And of course, it's the beam. Welcome to Tekla Open API world. But you have to remember that in Tekla, the beam, it means some bar element. It connects 2 points, start and end, and that's all. The direction, the orientation of that element, it doesn't matter. In the Tekla Open API, it will be just beam. And now the question about what exactly commit changes does. And some people thought that it saves the Tekla model. All of those things which you have done, which you have changed inside of the model, they are persisted as a db1 file. But that's not the truth. The commit changes just stores it in your RAM memory. So it's still temporary, it's quite fragile, so it's not persisted yet. But it also triggers the regeneration of the model. So if you commit changes very often, especially in the drawing area, then it will hurt the performance. So here, the correct answer is about the model regeneration and update of the user interface. Model Object Enumerator is a class which probably no one really likes, because in the modern C# world we always use LinkU, and it's much more faster, more robust. You can filter, you can query, you can do a lot of stuff. But in the Tekla Open API, the Model Object Enumerator, it solves one problem. So it's the way how you can grab, how you can fetch a lot of different model objects from the model. They can be filtered already or not. you can always get all of the beams, all of the bolts, all of the welds. There are different kind of a way how you can get that model object generator, but it's not LinkU friendly. But let's go to the next question. The contour plate in the Tekla Open API, it suffers as every model object. The constructor does not preserve what has to be provided to really create that kind of an object. So here you have to first create the new instance of the class contour plate and then assign the contour points. And if you know that, that's quite easy, but for the newcomers it's always quite hard to understand what properties has to be specified to create that kind of an object. But here, as you can see, most of the people were right about that question. One of the advantages of the Tekla itself is the ability to handle quite complex geometry. And to help you in that purpose, you can create many different work planes. And behind the hood, those work planes are using the transformation planes, but they are not the same. So the transformation plane class is not for creation of the work planes itself, but to help you, the software developer, in terms of understanding how to move, how to rotate, how to initiate your objects, especially if your model is not aligned with the global coordination system, or if you are detailing some existing object and the global coordination system, you don't care about that because you need to work in a local one. So use transformation plane wisely. That question is controversial, but let's try to understand what is the difference between the bold array and the bold group. Because the bold group is the abstract class, so it cannot be initiated. It's just a placeholder for all of those common properties for the bold array, for the bold circle, and the bold XY list. And the bold array is the class which can be initiated, which can be created. So whenever you want to create a bold group, you don't use the bold group, but you're using the bold array. And as you can see by the responses, it's not so easy, maybe it's a little confusing. So maybe I could create that question to phrase it a little differently, but my principle was like that the bold group, it cannot be created. The scenario presented in that question, it happens very, very rarely, but still, it's good that the Tekla Open API will throw the exception when you will try to modify something which doesn't exist. I would say that if it will try to create that object, then the answer number one, I would be surprised. And you can think about the scenario when you create the object, the C# object, but you are not inserting that yet, but later you want to modify that. So it can happen in the real production code, and I am happy that most of you answered correctly for that question. Next question, well known, used in every application or extension, but here, as Chris Kwiak pointed correctly, I have just misspelled. I lost the model from the correct answer. So of course it should be Tekla structures that model UI, and the peak object is the correct answer. The next question about the naming, and here fortunately the model inside of the Tekla Open API is just named model. So whenever you want to get connection status, to commit changes, or to query some kind of a project info, it's here. And also if you want to select some model object, if you know the identifier. So that was quite easy. Not everyone knows, but with the Tekla Open API, you can also listen to changes made by other applications or by the user itself. And to do it, you have to use the events class. There are separate events for the model area and the drawing area, but here, as you can see, there are quite a lot of those what has happened. And when one of those actions will really happen inside of the Tekla, your application, which is listening to that event, will get the information, will be invoked. So you can adjust, you can listen to that and try to make your own logic around of those events. Whenever you are dealing with more complex geometry, when you have to add some material or remove some material, then you know that you have to wrap the real instance of the part with the Boolean part. And then you can remove that material or add it to the real source object, the father part. So the Boolean part is the correct answer. Your code using the Tekla Open API can create many different kind of model objects, also custom components. Those clicked or created with that UI with a big table inside of the Tekla. But to do it, you cannot use the base component because this is the abstract class. So exactly the same as with the bolts. You cannot create the object of the instance of the base component, but you have to use the component because, of course, the custom component does not exist in such naming as a class. And as you can see in the documentation, the component class specifies that the custom part also belongs to that category. There are some scenarios when you want to query, when you want to fetch the data about the model object based on the identifier. Because, for example, you store it somehow in the previous run of your application, or you just get it from some other place. And the question is how to do that. And for that purpose, you need to use the class model, but the correct answer is the select model object. A little intuitive, but let's see that this is the way how you can do this. Select model object, take as input an identifier. Because get model object by GUID, which the name is quite verbose, it doesn't exist. Get model object by GUID, it's not here. You can get the identifier by GUID, but that's completely different operation. So that's all about that question. As I said previously, with the model object enumerator, it's not the class that we all like about. Internally, it has some kind of a counter, which starts from 0 and adds at the size of the provided element array, maybe it's not the list. So if you iterate it twice, you need to call reset just to set that counter to 0 and start iteration from the beginning. So that's how it works. The drawing part of the Tekla, especially the API, is probably not well known, but here I was very, very happy that most of the answers are correct. Of course, that's just Tekla structures drawing, nothing tricky here. That topic was covered already, but just to be precise, the commit changes should be done just once. Please do not try it after every insertion or modification, because this redrawing regeneration of the Tekla views, it will take quite a lot of time, especially if you are dealing with high complex models, because Tekla doesn't exactly know what will be the influence of your changes. So please use it wisely. Graphics Drawer is a very useful class because it have different methods, especially the draw text. It's used whenever you want to annotate something in the model area, but also you can try to draw line segments to, for example, to create some kind of a measurement in the 3D, or you can create the meshes, and it works really nicely, especially that you can remove those objects after some time, or after the user will click clean. So the graphics drawer is definitely a class worth to explore. The bottom bar in Tekla can be very useful. You can display there some kind of a prompt, some kind of information about what user have done. And to do that, you have to use the operation class. And the problem with the operation class is that it is just a bucket of miscellaneous operations, which doesn't belong to anywhere in particular. So you can add per units, you can create bend plates, you can export to the IFC, you can do a lot of stuff. But here, I want to display prompt, and that will be visible at the bottom area of your Tekla instance. And here, almost all of the answers are correct. All of those model objects, parts, rebars, bolts, welds, they all inherit from the model object. And now, with the newest Tekla version, there is always also one object above that, that's just Tekla object, or object. That's all, and there is the identifier. But here, the model object is the correct answer. The last question was about the UDAs, which are very useful for the Tekla modeling and preserving additional information. And for those, you need to just call setUserProperty, and then it's already persisted. And it's counterintuitive, because for changing the class, the name, other properties, you need to call modify on that model object. But for the UDAs, as they belong to a very specific table inside of the db1 file, it's not needed. It's persisted when you just set it. And that was the last question of Advent of Tekla 2025. I had quite a lot of joy when I was preparing those questions and thinking about, okay, how to make those a little more tricky. And as you can see, I was able to trick most of you, but there was one guy who scored at the top score, who have not made any mistake. But even if you made 1, 2, 3, 6 mistakes, then still you obtained a great result. Congratulations for you. And that's all. I would like to thank you all for the participation and that you just completed that video, which is quite a long one. So have a great Christmas and see you in 2026.